Alright, so it says solve this quadratic equation by showing and explaining the decision-making process to find a solution. First, check to see if it's a perfect square. So if it's a perfect square, this would look like if it's a perfect square, you're going to have like 2x squared equals 14, right? And so you would divide by 2, and x squared equals 7, and then you would take the square root. But we can't do this because of the 6x term. So so this is not a perfect square. Because of the 6x term. Alright, so we checked and it's not perfect square. If it is not a perfect square, explain why and then try to factor. Okay, so I did that. So now step 2 says I want to try and factor this. So before I can factor it, I've got to move everything over. So 2x squared minus 6x minus 13 equals 0. So when I go to factor it, I get 2x squared, and then this is minus 13. And so when I multiply, I get minus 26x squared minus 6x. The factors of 26 are 1 times 26 and 2 times 13. So clearly I can't factor this. So not factorable. Alright, so not factorable. So if not a perfect square, explain. Okay. Can you factor? Can you solve by the zero product property? So I'm going to say since it is not factorable, the zero product property will not work. Alright, so I tried to factor it. The zero product property is not going to help because I can't factor it. So if not, try to complete the square. So now I'm going to complete the square. So in order to do this, 2x squared minus 6x minus 13 equals 0. I can't have a coefficient, so I'm going to divide everything by 2. So then I get x squared minus 3x minus 7.5 equals 0. And to complete the square, I have to make the middle term, so x squared, this is minus 7.5. I'm just going to go over just a titch. And so, oh no, I'm sorry. I'm trying to factor and I'm supposed to be doing the perfect square. So let's try that again. So x squared, so remember perfect square is I want to split this. So that's minus 1.5x minus 1.5x. So this is x minus 1.5 and then x minus 1.5. And then 1.5 times 1.5 is 2.25. So this is 2.25. So this value right here has to be 2.25. So for this to work, I have to add 9.5 here. If I add 9.5, I have to add 9.5 over here. So then I get x squared minus 3x plus 2.25 equals 9.5. So then this ends up being x minus 1.5 squared equals 9.5. And so at this point now we completed the square. It wasn't pretty. I would say doing the quadratic formula for some of you probably would be easier. So in this particular problem you could do both. So I think if some of you were doing this problem and you got to getting the decimals and it got to be you weren't sure what you were doing, I would go to the quadratic formula. But let's just finish this. So we take the square root. So then we have x minus 1.5 equals the square root of 9.5, and then that's going to be x equals 1.5 plus or minus the square root of 9.5. And so then at this point we can convert this to decimals. So 1.5 plus the square root of 9.5 is 4.58, and then 1.5 minus the square root of 9.5 is negative 1.58. And like I said, you could have also used the quad formula on this. Completing the square works, it just is, you get decimals and you got to work a little bit harder.